She wasn't breathing. Kian pressed his trembling hand against Isabella's throat, searching for a pulse. But nothing. The sound around him had vanished. The screaming crowd, the shattered glass, even the music that had filled the gala minutes ago. Only her stillness existed now. Her eyes fluttered half open, lips pale, her chest still. And before his mind could argue, his instincts kicked in. He sealed his mouth over hers and forced life back into her lungs. One breath. 2. 3. And just then, camera flashes exploded from every direction. There were wide gasps and whispers, the chaos of 1,000 opinions born in 1 second. To them, it looked like a kiss. But to him, it was survival. And that single act would destroy both their worlds. Aloria's city glimmered like a diamond that refused to admit it was flawed. Every skyscraper mirrored the next. Every street carried the scent of new money and old secrets. Kian Reed had never belonged here. He came from the district people never mentioned, the one where light bulbs barely lit up and dreams rusted. Now, standing before the gates of Heart Tower, he looked up at the empire he was about to guard, or die trying to. The job sounded simple: to protect the heiress, to obey her father, and to stay invisible. But something in his gut whispered that simplicity was a lie. Charles Hart didn't bother sitting down. He stood behind his desk, his eyes cold and calculating, as if scanning Kian's soul for flaws. "You're ex-military?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Kian replied. "Why did you leave the military?" he asked. Kian hesitated and said, "Let's just say, I got tired of following orders that buried good men." Charles gave a humorless smile and said firmly, "Then this should feel familiar. My daughter has been receiving threats. You will keep her alive. But remember, she's worth more than you will ever earn in 10 lifetimes. So don't get too close." The warning landed sharper than intended. Kian only nodded as he said, "Understood." He didn't yet know how wrong that promise would go. He met Isabella Hart the next morning. The tabloids called her the Heart of Aloria, the perfect daughter, the billionaire angel. But in person, she wasn't an angel. She was fire-wrapped in diamonds. Her heels clicked with precision as she walked into her office. "You are my new bodyguard?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am," Kian answered. "Do you follow orders?" she asked. "When they make sense," he replied. She looked at him, the plain suit, the steady eyes, the unshakable calm. Something about him unsettled her. Something about her reminded him of every world he had been told he could never touch. "Fine," she said, folding her arms. "Just don't hover." But he hovered anyway. That night, Kian reviewed the security footage from Isabella's penthouse and froze. At exactly 1:13 a.m., a shadow moved across her balcony. A second later, the cameras cut to static. He sprinted to her suite, his gun drawn. She was asleep, peaceful and unaware. And on her pillow lay a single red envelope with bold black letters. "Tell your father he can't buy my silence." Kian's pulse spiked. Whoever this was, they weren't bluffing. Isabella refused to cancel her appearance at the gala. The Aloria Philanthropy Gala was her father's pride, a night of glitter, cameras, and charity checks written for applause. Backing out now would look weak, she said, adjusting her gold gown before the mirror. Kian stood behind her, his expression unreadable. "Being dead would look worse," he muttered. Her eyes met his through the reflection, their two worlds in one locked glance. "Then you better make sure that doesn't happen," she said calmly. The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers. The music soared, and champagne flowed. And then, the lights dimmed for half a second. Kian's hand moved to his earpiece as he said, "Unit 2, confirm." The next second, Isabella gasped and staggered. A dart glinted in her neck. She clawed for air, her eyes wide. Kian caught her before she hit the floor. He tore the dart free and smelled the faint burn of chemicals. "She's not breathing," someone screamed. Kian didn't think. He laid her on the marble, tilted her chin, and began CPR. 1 breath. 2. Her chest rose faintly. "Come on, Isabella," he whispered. "Please breathe." The cameras started to click, reporters shouting, and somewhere in the chaos, her father arrived just in time to see his daughter's life and reputation being rewritten. The next morning, the headline screamed across every screen. "Poor bodyguard steals heiress's first kiss. Hero or thief?" Kian Reed caught on camera saving Isabella Hart. The internet turned his desperation into scandal. Talk shows replayed it frame by frame. twisting survival into seduction. By noon, Charles Hart had already made his decision. "Pack your things," he told Kian. "You are fired." Kian didn't argue. He simply left. 3 days later, Isabella stood on her balcony, scrolling through endless news clips of that moment. The world saw a kiss. She remembered the way his voice shook when he whispered her name. She had never felt safer or more exposed. "Vera," she said quietly, "find out where Kian Reed lives." Her assistant blinked. "You want to sue him?" she asked. "No," Isabella said, her eyes fixed on the horizon. "I want to thank him." Kian's apartment sat above a noisy street. When Isabella knocked, he didn't open immediately. Then the door creaked open slightly. He looked different, unshaven, and tired, like a man used to losing and pretending it didn't hurt. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I know," Isabella replied. "You're a walking headline, Miss Hart," he said. "And you are the reason I'm still one," she shot back. He hesitated. The sarcasm fell, leaving silence. Her gaze softened. "You saved me. You got fired for it. I just wanted to say, thank you." He nodded slowly. "You're welcome." And just when it seemed the moment would fade into politeness, a sharp crack shattered the air. A bullet tore through the window behind her, missing her shoulder by inches. Kian yanked her down to the floor, his body shielding hers as shards of glass rained around them. Sirens wailed in the distance. "Now," he said hoarsely, his heartbeat pounding against hers. "Do you believe me when I say you're not safe?" Kian's arm bled from a shallow cut, but his grip on Isabella's hand was steady. "Move," he commanded. She didn't argue this time. The arrogance that once framed her confidence had been replaced by raw fear. They ran down a flight of back stairs, his boots heavy, her heels clicking on the stairs. When they burst into the alley, his black SUV screeched to a stop. One of his old military contacts was behind the wheel. "Where to?" the driver barked. "Safe house. No questions," Kian commanded. They sped through the city until the skyline gave way to cliffs and mist. The air here was colder, sharper. It was a world away from Aloria's glitz. By the time they stopped, the sun was sinking into the sea. Kian opened the car door and said, "This is where we disappear." The cabin was small, tucked into the rocky edge of the coast. There were no security cameras, no luxury, just safety and the hum of waves crashing below. Isabella stood awkwardly in the middle of the room. "You actually live like this?" she asked. "Not usually," he said, lighting a small lantern. "But it's safer than your penthouse." She smiled faintly. "I can see why no one would find me here." "There's no Wi-Fi," she said frustratingly. "You'll survive," he said calmly. "I might not," she murmured, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed. He looked at her, his face unreadable, but his tone softened. "You will. I promise." That word, promise, hung in the air longer than either of them intended. The storm arrived that night. Isabella couldn't sleep. Every shadow looked like danger. Every sound felt like a gun being cocked. Kian sat by the window, his silhouette sharp against flashes of lightning. "You're awake," she whispered. "Soldiers rarely sleep when they should," he replied. She wrapped her arms around herself. "I've been thinking about the night of the gala." He turned slightly, listening. "The moment you saved me." She hesitated. "You didn't even flinch. You didn't hesitate." He gave a small, humorless laugh. When someone stops breathing, there's no time to think. She looked down at her hands and whispered. Still, everyone else just watched. Their eyes met. For a second, she wasn't a billionaire's daughter, and he wasn't the poor man paid to protect her. They were just two people, caught between fear and something dangerously close to desire. A few hours passed. The rain eased. Kian started a small fire to warm the room. Isabella sat near the flames, her bare feet tucked under her gown. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Go ahead. Why did you become a bodyguard?" He stared into the fire. "Because I'm good at taking bullets that were meant for other people." She frowned. "That's not an answer." He sighed. "I had a brother. Younger. He died because of a rich man's mistake. I thought if I could protect someone powerful, maybe I would balance the scale." Her eyes softened. "You think protecting me makes up for what happened?" "No," he said, "but it helps me forget." The honesty in his voice pierced her. For once, she saw the man. Not the guard, not the employee, but the wounded soul underneath the confidence. And for the first time, she didn't feel sorry for him. She felt seen by him. Sometime after midnight, Kian heard a crunch outside. He motioned for silence. Isabella froze. He grabbed his gun and moved toward the door. Lightning flashed. A figure darted past the window. "Stay down," he whispered. He opened the door slowly, and a body crashed into him. They wrestled in the mud, grunts swallowed by thunder. Kian twisted the man's arm, disarming him. The stranger wore an all-black mercenary gear, with no insignia, and he was very professional. "Who sent you?" Kian growled. The man spat blood. "Ask the one you're protecting." Before Kian could press further, a shot rang out from the darkness. The intruder's body went limp. Kian dropped him, scanning the cliff. Whoever pulled the trigger was gone. He stormed back inside. Isabella's face was pale. "What happened?" He looked at her, suspicion lurking in his eyes. "You tell me. Who would spend this much money trying to kill you?" Her voice trembled. "I don't know. But deep down she did." By morning, the rain had cleared. Isabella stood outside, staring at the sea, the wind tugging at her robe. Kian joined her, his jaw tight. "The man last night wasn't random. He knew your name." Her hands clenched around the railing. "There's something you should know," she began. "My father, he's been negotiating a merger. The deal could make Heart Group twice as powerful. But the family we're merging with, the Stone family, they don't play clean. I refused the marriage that was supposed to seal it." Kian's brows furrowed. "You were supposed to marry someone for a business deal?" "Yes." Her voice shook slightly. "When I said no, the threats started." He took a slow breath. "So this isn't random at all. They want to break your father, through you." She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. "He doesn't even know I'm telling you this. He would rather bury the truth than admit weakness." Kian turned away, struggling between duty and something deeper. "He's risking your life for his empire." She whispered. "That's all he's ever cared about." For a long time, they said nothing, just stood together, the ocean roaring below. That evening, Kian repaired the cabin's broken window. Isabella cooked simple pasta from a tin, the first meal she had ever made by herself. They ate quietly by the fire. "You know," she said after a while, "you're a terrible company." He looked up, smirking faintly. "You talk too much for someone in hiding." Her laugh was soft and unexpected. "Maybe that's why I feel safer here. You don't treat me like a heart. You just talk to me," she said calmly. "Maybe that's because I forget sometimes," he replied smoothly. She tilted her head as she asked. "Forget what?" "That you are untouchable," he said firmly. Her breath paused. The room felt smaller. Lightning flashed in the distance again, painting their faces gold for half a heartbeat. "I'm not untouchable, Kian," she whispered. He froze, the distance between them disappearing inch by inch, until her hand brushed his. For a second, time held its breath. Then he stood up abruptly, stepping back as he said, "You should rest." Her voice followed him softly. "Or maybe you should stop pretending you don't want to." The next morning, a black SUV arrived near the cliff road. Kian spotted it through binoculars. The Hart family crest was on the hood. "What the hell?" he muttered. He stepped outside, hand on his gun. Two men in suits exited the car, followed by Vera James, Isabella's best friend. "Vera," Isabella gasped. "Your father sent me," she said quickly. "He's been worried sick. You're safe now." Kian didn't buy it. "How did you find us?" She avoided his eyes. "GPS tag. Isabella's bracelet has one." He turned sharply toward Isabella. She looked shocked as she declared, "I didn't know." He glared at Vera and said, "You led them here. Who else knows?" Vera hesitated, and that was all the answer he needed. Inside, Kian barked, pushing Isabella back toward the cabin. The air erupted with gunfire. Bullets ripped through the walls. Kian tackled Isabella to the ground, shouting, "Stay down." Splinters flew, windows shattered. He returned fire, calculated and precise. "Why are they shooting at us?" Isabella screamed. "Because your father's deal isn't about business anymore. It's war." When the dust cleared, one SUV burned on the cliffside. The others sped off into the fog. Vera lay on the ground, injured but alive, tears mixing with blood. "I didn't know," she cried. "They said they only wanted to bring her home." Isabella knelt beside her, her heart breaking. "You betrayed me." Vera sobbed as she pleaded, "I'm sorry." Kian pulled Isabella away gently. "We need to move before they come back." As they drove off in the stolen SUV, the flames behind them mirrored the storm that had just begun between duty and desire. The SUV tore down the coastal road. Kian's hands were steady on the wheel, his jaw set. Isabella sat beside him, her hair whipped wild, her eyes fixed on the endless stretch of gray ocean. Neither of them spoke. The silence between them was louder than the gunfire they had left behind. Finally, she whispered, "Where do we go now?" "Somewhere your father's men won't look. The only safe place left is off the map," he replied calmly. He veered toward the old industrial district, a skeleton of factories that once fed the city before the rich turned it into a playground. When they stopped, Kian parked behind a rusted warehouse, turned off the engine, and exhaled. "You should eat," he said. "I'm not hungry," she replied. "You'll need strength for what's coming," he said firmly. She looked at him then, her voice barely a breath. "What is coming, Kian?" He didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know. Inside the warehouse, Kian checked his gun, scanning the shadows, while Isabella found an old blanket and wrapped it around herself. She studied him, the way his shoulders moved, the faint scar near his collarbone, the exhaustion behind his control. "You've been bleeding since last night," she said softly. "I've had worse," he said unbothered. "Why do you always do that?" she asked. He frowned. "Do what? Pretend you don't hurt?" she asked curiously. He stopped cleaning the gun, his eyes lifting to hers as he said, "Because in my world, pain gets you killed." She stepped closer to him and whispered, "In mine, silence does." For a long moment, they just stood there, two survivors of different kinds of wars. Then she said quietly, "You saved my life twice. You've risked everything for me." "What?" His voice dropped, rough and honest. "Because somewhere along the way, it stopped being my job." He took a step forward, then another, until her back touched the wall. "Isabella." She looked up at him, her heart racing. "Say it," she urged him. "I can't," he blurted out. "Yes, you can." She encouraged him. He hesitated only a heartbeat longer. Then, he kissed her. It wasn't desperate like before. It was slow, inevitable, the kind of kiss that made time jealous. The rain outside softened, as if even the storm paused to watch. When they finally pulled apart, her voice trembled. "What happens now?" His answer was the truth neither of them wanted. "Now we survive the consequences." Morning crept in, pale and uninvited. Kian's phone buzzed. It was a number he didn't recognize. He answered cautiously. A man's voice said, "You have something that belongs to us." Kian froze. "Who is this?" "You know who. Bring the girl to the Heart Tower by noon, or the next bullet won't miss." The call ended. Isabella had heard everything. "They'll kill you if you go back," she said. He met her gaze as he said, "If I don't, they'll come for you again. And this time they won't stop." She grabbed his arm. "You can't face them alone." "I'm not planning to." He turned toward the sunlight, his jaw set with that soldier calm she was beginning to hate. The Loria Tower shimmered against the noon sky, pretending it wasn't the center of a storm. Kian entered through the underground level, the same corridors he had once patrolled as an employee. Now he moved like a ghost. At the top floor, Charles' heart was waiting. He looked older, angrier, but not surprised. "You brought her." Isabella stepped from behind Kian. "What's going on, father?" Charles sighed. "What always goes on. Power. Money. You were supposed to marry Thomas Stone and secure the merger. Instead, you humiliated me." She shook her head, disbelief turning to disgust. "You knew about the threats?" "I arranged the warning shots," he said quietly. "To scare you into compliance, not to harm you. But the Stones, they took it further." Kian's fists tightened. "You used her as bait in your own game?" "Watch your tone," Charles snapped. "No," Isabella said, tears cutting through her fury. "Let him speak." Kian stepped forward, his voice low but sharp. "Men like you never change. You build empires on other people's pain. And when it crumbles, you send soldiers like me to clean up the mess." Charles's eyes narrowed. "You forgot your place." Kian's reply was a whisper. "Maybe it's time I stopped having one." Before Charles could respond, the doors burst open. Thomas Stone, the man Isabella was supposed to marry, walked in with 3 armed guards. "Well," he sneered, "the prodigal heiress returns. And with her pet bodyguard." Kian shifted subtly, positioning himself between Isabella and the guns. Thomas smirked. "You've caused quite the scandal, Miss Hart. But don't worry. I'm a forgiving man. Hand her over, Charles, and the deal still stands." Charles hesitated. "You promised not to hurt her." Thomas's grin was pure venom. "I lied. Everything happened at once. The shouts, the gunfire, and the glass shattering." Kian tackled Isabella behind the marble desk, firing back with deadly precision. 2 guards fell. A third grazed his arm. Charles tried to crawl toward his daughter, shouting her name. Then a stray bullet struck him. The silence that followed was deafening. Kian rose. Fury and fear fused into focus. He shot the last guard, then faced Thomas. You really think you can protect her forever? Thomas spat. I don't need forever, Kian said coldly. Just enough time to end this. The next shot echoed like thunder. Thomas Stone fell. Kian turned back to Isabella, her father bleeding out, her world collapsing. He knelt beside Charles, checking his pulse. Charles's voice was faint. You saved her again. Kian didn't reply. Charles's eyes found his daughter. Don't hate me, Bella. I just wanted to keep what was ours. Then his hand went still. Isabella's sob broke the quietness. Kian reached for her, but she pulled away, trembling. He's dead because of me. No, Kian said softly. He's dead because of him. Days blurred into weeks. With a series of investigations, police lights, lawyers, the media called it the Heart Tower tragedy. The world hailed Kian as a hero again, but this time he wanted none of it. He disappeared before the headlines could crown him. When Isabella finally tracked him down, he was on the pier at dawn, staring at the water. She approached him quietly. So this is where you run to? He smiled faintly. I prefer to think of it as retreating with purpose. She stood beside him, her hair dancing in the wind. The company's mine now. I can fix what he broke. I know you will. She turned toward him. You could stay, be my head of security, or just stay. He looked at her, and for a heartbeat, she saw everything he wasn't saying. I don't belong in your world, Isabella. Her voice barely a whisper. You're wrong. You became my world. He exhaled, his eyes bright with something between love and surrender. Then promise me you'll make it a better one. She reached for his hand. And if I refuse? He smiled sadly. Then I'll kiss you goodbye and let you hate me for leaving. Tears shimmered in her eyes. Kian. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead to hers, and whispered, Stay alive, princess. Then he turned and walked down, the sunrise painting his silhouette gold until it vanished into light. Like this video, share and subscribe for more exciting stories coming up.